Our scripture reading comes from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 8 through 18, and is in the bulletin if you'd like to read along. If you'd like to just listen, that also works. Let us hear the word this morning. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. May God add blessing and understanding to the hearing of these words. Have you ever known someone who was determined? If you've ever been a parent and had a 2 or a 3-year-old, surely you've known someone who was determined. Maybe you have had other people in your life that you have known that they were going to do what they needed to do. They were determined. When it comes to determined people, you either love them or you don't. If you've had anybody in your life that you've admired, I'm betting that determination would be one of the characteristics that you would use to describe that person. Because I think that if anyone is admirable, more than likely, they are a determined person. They know what they want. They go after it. They overcome obstacles. Nothing gets in the way. Well, Ruth is a determined person. There's a family that once lived in the land of Judah and Israel. The husband's name is Elimelech. The wife is Naomi. And they have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And they leave the land of Judah and move to Moab because there is strife. There is famine. There's no rain. There's no crops. They can go somewhere else and live a better life. So a family determined on a better life moves on. When they get there, the 2 sons marry women from Moab, Moabite women, you might say. And so Orpah, which always makes me think of Oprah, Orpah and Ruth are added to the family. They live together for some time, and Elimelech dies. And then Mahlon and Chilion also die, leaving the women on their own. And in that day and time, that was not good news. There was hardly any work that could be done. They were determined to live a life of poverty. They had no power, no authority to do anything different. And according to Jewish law, the women were really only supposed to marry within the family. So it would be that Elimelech's oldest brother should be marrying Naomi. It should be that if there were other brothers in the family, instead of just Mahlon and Chilion, they would take over the role of husband to Ruth and Orpah. But there is no one. Naomi living in a strange land with her Moabite daughters. says to them, go back to your own families. Go back to your own gods. Go back to your own way of being a religious person. Maybe you don't have the same kind of restrictions in your part of the world. Maybe you could remarry. Maybe you could. But they refuse. Well, at least for a moment. Naomi says, go back, go back, go back. Go have a life. You can't have a life with me. I'm not going to have more sons. That's what that whole part is about. It's those marriage laws within the life of the Jewish tradition that the women would stay a part of the family and marry those sons. But there will be no more sons. There is no life with Naomi for Ruth and Orpah. So she says, go home, go home, go home. Go be with your families. Go marry again. Go do something different. This is no life. God has turned against me, but not necessarily against you. Go, go, go. And Orpah finally says, okay, I'll go. But Ruth, no. Ruth remembers her promise. She holds fast to this new faith that she has been born into, in a sense, when she got married. And she says, I will stay with you. It's actually, 1 Corinthians 13 is often, the love passage is often used at weddings. But for those who want something a little different, they turn to this passage in Ruth, verses 16 and 17, where Ruth says, do not press me to leave you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. May God do bad things to me, thus and so to me, if even death separates me from you. She was determined to go. She was determined to hold fast to the promises that she has made to this family. Now, if you've read the book, you know that there's hardly any mentioning of God, maybe not even at all. It's a story about a family and how they survive and how they exist in difficult times. Naomi and Ruth, they go back to the land of Judah. When they get there, there's nothing left for them. But there is a relative named Boaz. And so Naomi acts like the good mom that she is and instructs Ruth on what to do to provide for her and to provide for herself and for Naomi, and eventually how to woo the man so that she can get married. And so there will be something more than poverty for Ruth and Naomi. Boaz is a landowner, and so Ruth goes and she works the field, but she hasn't been hired to work the field, and so she's picking up the crumbs. As people take the crops, she gets what's left, what falls to the ground. She's invited to share table with all the workers and with Boaz, and eventually he finds out that this is a distant relative. And Ruth makes it with Naomi's help and leadership. She makes it so that Boaz understands what she wants. She wants to become his wife, and he's willing to do that. He's willing to take Ruth and Naomi in to his family. He's willing to marry her, but there's one other relative, so he has to work the deal. Eventually, Ruth marries Boaz. They have a son who has a son who has a son. That son is King David. By overcoming all the trials and the struggles, she becomes the great-grandmother to the greatest king in Israelite history. She was determined, and from her came great things. Now, you've known determined people. Surely you've known determined people. There are even determined people who make it on a larger scale than just people that we know. Maybe you've heard of a man named Eric LeGrand. He's probably about 25 or 26 right now. He played football at Rutgers University, and one night in the middle of the game, he had a bad hit. It affected his body in such a way that he became paralyzed. He was told he would never walk, that he would be a quadriplegic. His coach was Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano has now moved to be the coach of the Miami Dolphins in the NFL. They have maintained a close relationship with each other. Eric LeGrand continually says to people, I'm going to walk again. And in fact, he has. He's taken one step. For a man who was told that he would always be in a wheelchair and never be able, he's determined not to be that. He's taken one step. He speaks now and tries to empower people to learn that they can be something more, that they can do what they want to do if they are just determined enough. You would never think that a man like this could be drafted by a pro football team. But as a badge of honor, Greg Schiano, with his last pick as the coach of the Miami Dolphins, decided that they would draft Eric LeGrand so that he could fulfill his dream, his lifelong dream of being a member of a team in the NFL. Did he ever play it down? No. Did he ever get paid a penny? No. But he got an honorary status as a team member because he's such a great example. I saw a movie recently. The name of the movie is Made in Dagenham. It is set in England in 1968. In 1968 in England, the Ford plant had a classification of workers, and depending on your classification, whether you were skilled or unskilled, you got more or less money. Well, there were 168 women, and you know what they made? Car seats, the covers to the car seats. They were women who used needle and thread, and they made car seats, but they were labeled as unskilled workers. Although there were men in another plant who were labeled as skilled workers who were making more money than they were. Through a series of events, the women decide to go on strike. And not only at that Ford plant in Dagenham, but all over England, they decide to strike. Well, I don't know about you, but I would never want to ride in a car that didn't have seats. Because of their actions, Ford had to deal. They had to come to terms. They had to decide what to do. There were conversations behind the scenes with the Prime Minister's office, and it was, well, we'll just pull all of our plants if we have to pay these women this salary. And they were like, well, we believe in these women and their fight. There was an agreement reached, but there was a lot of strife in the process. In Dagenham, almost everybody worked at the plant, men and women. And so the men were getting pressure from their superiors, get your wives back to work. Those of you who were alive in 1968, you get it a little better than maybe some of us in this room who weren't there. I was there, I was just one. But I lived with a very determined mom, so I get it. In the movie, there is a woman named Rita who kind of takes the place of many women who fought that battle. But they fought a battle for equality. They fought a battle of fairness. And they were determined, even to economic hardship, even to fights with their spouses, even to standing up to men which they had never done in their lives. And they won. They won. Ford relented and now is recognized as a fair company for all of its employees based on a struggle that they had in 1968 with a group of 168 women who just wanted to be known as skilled laborers so they could be paid what they should be paid. There are people of determination in this world. I saw on Sports Center, one of my favorite stations, there was a show, a documentary that they aired on a guy named Todd O'Donnell, lives back east, has 2 sons, raised them up to be wrestlers. His two sons were great wrestlers, participated in the state tournament, and one of them even won the state championship. The family motto is no quit. No quit. From the time that his boys were in little league wrestling all the way up to high school and college, he would be in their face to say, no quit. You may not win this match. You may not be the best wrestler here, but you do not give up. No quit. If there's anything that talks of determination, it is that mantra, that phrase, no quit, no quit, no quit. Something he learned from growing up as a blue-collar man, raising a blue-collar family. His son, a police officer, continued to wrestle in tournaments past college. In fact, he still wrestles as a police officer, and next year is going to another tournament, his last tournament, an international tournament of police and firefighters, and it's over in England, of all places, in fact. So he's excited to take his whole family there. Because he was in the finals of this tournament, all the family got together to watch the brother wrestle. He didn't win. He finished second. The next morning, in his hotel room, he slipped. He hit his head on the bed. Had to be rushed to the emergency room. Had to have emergency surgery for swelling of the brain. It was touch and go. They called in all the family. Todd O'Donnell lay there, this man who had fought all of his life, no quit, who had instilled those principles in his family, his sons especially, was sitting there in a coma that they had induced for him. They wanted his head to rest, but they expected that he would come out of it on his own. Hours turned to a day, which was expected, but days turned into other days, which turned into a week, and that was unexpected. The boys that had been raised with no quit finally said to their father, whispering in his ears, "It's okay. You can quit. Don't hold on for us." They gave him permission. But he didn't. He woke up. He woke up. One of the boys was filming this, so it's a documentary now. If you want to see it, you can. But when he woke up, the son, the wrestler, got into his father's ears and he said, "No quit, not now, not if you wake up. No quit, no quit, no quit. You instilled that in us and we're going to put it right back into you. No quit." Some of his first words, because he had to retrain his brain. He had to learn how to speak again. He had to learn how to walk again. He had to learn how to feed himself. It was a long process. But the mantra was, no quit. Today, he's back. Not fully, not completely, changed a little by the experience. He says that now he gets a little more emotional than he used to. I wonder if that just comes with age, because my father does that too. Maybe it has nothing to do with the swelling of the brain. The son wrestled in a tournament, got to the finals. They have the documentary going. The son wins the championship, comes over, takes the medal. I mean, it's like they raise his hand, they put the medal on him, and he makes a beeline for his father, takes the medal off, puts it on his dad, and says, "This was for you. No quit." I wonder what no quit, determined people of faith look like. Think from a biblical example. We have Abraham and Sarah. We have Isaac. We have Jacob, who gets renamed Israel. We have King David. We have the disciples, not so much when Jesus was alive, but after his death. It is their work that continued after his death, why we have a church today. We have others, but Jesus is the central character, the ultimate determined person who knew God's will for his life and maybe wavered a bit, but never so far that he couldn't find the path again. He was determined to follow through with what God had determined for him to do. There are other people that we could look at who are more modern day. Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa. Those are the easy ones, but there are others. How about Joyce Meyer? How about Robert Schuller? How about a man called Peter? Some of you will know this book. I lift it up because how often is it that a preacher can become so famous that they'll write a movie about him and it will be Oscar nominated? So as a preacher, I have to talk about that, right? It doesn't happen all that often. His wife wrote this book in honor of him. He was born in Scotland without anything, very poor. Found a call in his life early to become a minister. At 24, moves to the United States. At 31, graduates from Columbia Theological, goes to 2 pastorates before moving to Atlanta, then ends up in New York at a very well-known Presbyterian church. Twice became the chaplain of the United States serving Congress. Determined to follow. I wonder what determined no-quit churches look like. Do they take seriously the words of Ruth? Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. I will share this experience of God with you where you are. We can experience that together. Do no-quit, determined churches stay just to themselves? No, they go beyond their doors. They go to the people and they bring a message of unconditional love and radical grace that's freely offered to everyone. This is what we have in this place. We see it every time we come to this table. We feel it and we know it. But it's not a gift that we hold to ourselves. In this season of gift giving and gratitude, we know that that's a gift we've got to give because people are desperate. People are desperate to know what we know. Some have never heard the story. Some have just forgotten. Are we this church? Are we no-quit, determined followers of the faithful one? I hope. I hope we are. And may it be so.